All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We will go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Department of State Hospitals Incompetent to Stand Trial Solutions Program Update Trailer Bill Language Overview presentation. My name is Sydney Taylor, and I will start by going over some housekeeping rules and then the agenda before handing it off to our presenters. Starting with the housekeeping rules, first of all, this meeting is being recorded. The slideshow presentation, as well as the recording, will be posted to the DSH website, and a notification will be sent out once it is posted. Throughout the duration of the meeting, everyone will remain muted, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. During that time, you can use the raise hand feature, and it will prompt you to unmute once it is your turn to speak. We do ask that you please hold all questions until the end of the presentation during the Q&A session. We will first begin with the questions asked that were submitted in the registration form. Then we will go to any questions that you all can put in the chat. You can also use a raise hand feature if you don't have access to the chat or want to verbalize your question. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, we do ask that you use the chat feature to explain your issue. All right, we will go ahead and go to the agenda. Just a brief overview of the great items we have to discuss today. We'll start with Chris Edens going over the welcome and introduction, followed by JC Thompson discussing care coordination. Stacy Camacho will then go over early access and stabilization services, followed by Ashley Breath, who will discuss diversion and community-based restoration. Dr. Melinda DeCero will then talk about reevaluation. And then after that, we will have a few members of the team discuss other community-based IST programs and updates, as well as answer questions during the Q&A session. Thank you everyone for joining, and I will go ahead and hand it off to our Chief Deputy Director of Program Services, Chris Edens.
Thank you, Sydney. I really appreciate it. So, hi everyone. My name is Chris Edens. I'm the Chief Deputy Director for Program Services here at the Department of State Hospitals. Thanks to everybody and for taking time out of your busy schedules today to join us. As you sort of heard a sort of a flavor as Sydney ran through our agenda, today's presentation is an opportunity to share the components of our IST Solutions budget package and to highlight the statutory changes that we made that complement this budget package and will help us to implement the various programs that fall under the umbrella of our IST Solutions. And so we've organized this presentation, as you saw on the agenda, by our major program component. And so we'll run through those various sort of features of each component of the IST budget package, as well as highlight the key statutory changes that are associated with those, any of those key statutory changes that do not fall squarely under the umbrella of that particular program will be covered at the end of the presentation, and that we'll have some time for questions and answers at the end. So, so let's go ahead and just head right in. And this first slide here is talking about our IST Solutions work group. So as part of the last year's budget cycle 21-22, the legislature charged the California Health and Human Services Agency and DSH to convene an IST Solutions work group to identify short, medium, and long-term solutions to advance alternatives to placement in DSH competency restoration programs. It really sort of came to a head after a number of years of significant year-over-year increases in the rate of IST referrals that were coming to the Department of State Hospitals. And every year we have been increasing both our bed capacity in our state hospitals, as well as through the establishment of jail-based competency treatment programs. And then in recent years, we have been piloting programs in partnership with the counties to implement diversion And we also have one community-based restoration program in partnership with Los Angeles County. But despite sort of all the growth in these beds, well over 1,000 beds from 2012 on, we have never been able to keep up with the demand of the number of IST referrals coming to our department. So this IST Solutions work group was comprised of different state and local representatives and stakeholders, including representatives of patients and their family member organizations. And that work group met many times during the fall and between August and November. And through that process, this work group identified 41 strategies and solutions that were outlined ultimately in a report that was made public on November 30th of 2021. This report was then used to inform the development of the department's IST Solutions budget package. And that framework of the budget package was initially introduced as part of the governor's budget release in January. Ultimately, the legislature did approve our budget package. We're very fortunate for that. And it totals $535.5 million. Starting with this fiscal year 22-23, and then over the course of 4 years, ultimately increases to $638 million on an annual ongoing basis. Next slide, please. So who are felony ISTs? Many of you who participated in our presentation, different presentations in the past have seen this information. But I think it's always good to level set a bit with a reminder of the information we've learned about the individuals who are committed as incompetent to stand trial. And these are the individuals who come to us on those felony charges. So first, really, we're talking about human beings, and these individuals are dealing with serious mental illness. Approximately 70% of the IST individuals that we admit into our state hospital system, about 70% of them have one of 3 primary diagnoses: that's schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, and bipolar disorder. These are, again, individuals who are accused of felony crimes, but due to their mental illness, they're unable to understand the charges against them or assist their counsel in their defense. So ultimately, the courts make the call on whether that person is deemed incompetent to stand trial, and then may order them to the Department of State Hospitals for treatment. And the court is typically informed by information that's provided by a county evaluator, or we call them alienists, regarding the individual's competency status. And then as far as placement determination goes, typically the community program director assigned to that region would make that determination. In addition, as part of our research, we've learned that most of the felony IST population are homeless at the time of arrest. Nearly 50% of the individuals, again, that we have studied and admit into our state hospital system, nearly 50% of them come to us in an unsheltered homeless status. When you consider both sheltered and unsheltered, that's nearly 65% of the individuals that we admit into the hospitals. We also did some data matching with Department of Healthcare Services against their Medi-Cal records. And again, nearly 50% of the individuals, IST individuals that we admit into our hospitals had not accessed Medi-Cal reimbursable mental health services in the 6 months prior to their arrest. And then lastly, really, these are individuals that we consider, these are the high utilizers in our systems. They cycle in and out of the criminal justice system, likely emergency, they're receiving also emergency room services. But in terms of their criminal justice history, nearly half, again, almost 50%, had 15 or more prior arrests prior to being committed to the department as IST. Next slide, please. So what happens after IST treatment? Typically, IST treatment that the department provides is targeted to focus on the barrier to competency. This is not intended to be comprehensive mental health treatment, Really, the goal of treatment is to restore that competency and then help us facilitate the individual's right to a speedy trial. To that end, we're simply really treating that person, that specific barrier to competency, where that primary intervention is typically medication, to help stabilize that person and then ultimately return that person to jail so that the court may proceed with their case. However, this is doing nothing to address the root cause of the problem and the conditions that led to these individuals being arrested and caught up in the criminal justice system in the first place. So we also matched our data with DOJ records and found that about 76% of the IST individuals that we treat at Department of State hospitals actually end up remaining at the county level after we've discharged them. And you can kind of see the breakdown. Over 25% ultimately have their case dismissed. Another portion serves their sentence through probation or through probation in the county. And then another proportion of the population ends up serving their sentence in local county jail. And then about 24% of the individuals end up staying with the state for a period of time, either serving predominantly a prison sentence, and a very tiny fraction, 0.2%, end up coming back to the Department of State hospitals under the not guilty by reason of insanity commitment. And then I should also note that there's also a small contingent of individuals who are conserved if they are determined to not be restored to competency or not unrestorable at the time of their end of treatment. But we don't really have that information called out onto these slides. Ultimately, we did see that in our data set, we saw that over 70% of the IST individuals that were discharged from our system were rearrested within 3 years post-discharge. Next slide, please. So why is this happening? Our brilliant medical director, Dr. Kate Warburton, who's a forensically trained psychiatrist, helped to craft this hypothesis that we have been sharing with many of you and who have participated in prior presentations that we've given. So we believe that really that individuals with schizophrenia spectrum disorders are drifting into an untreated, unsheltered condition. And these conditions are leading to increased contact with police, and they're ending up with these criminal charges. The increased criminal justice contact is driving a surge in those IST referrals to our state hospitals, but building more state hospital beds will only exacerbate the problem. Since IST restoration is not really an adequate and not intended to be a long-term treatment plan, what can we do to address this crisis? Next slide, please. What we can do is we can break the cycle. I think this is a pretty powerful graphic that depicts what's happening with the majority of the people who are deemed incompetent to stand trial on felony charges. You can see up at the top here that, we feel folks are in the community, they're untreated, they're unsheltered, they're acting in ways that are perhaps, or the conditions that they're living in are leading to interactions with law enforcement. They're getting arrested, they're landing in jail. They might ultimately come to DSH for a period of time for treatment. We're releasing them. Again, remember 75%, just over 75% are ending up returning back to the community. Once they're ultimately released from jail, they're going right back to the conditions from when they originally came to us in an unsheltered, untreated condition. And then within that 3 years, about 70% are being rearrested and they're going back to jail. Next slide, please. So I think What we truly believe is that in order to break the cycle, we need to support meaningful community treatment. And that's really what our IST solutions budget package is all about. I think many of you who know us and who have been working with us for the last few years as we've partnered with counties to pilot the diversion programs for this population know that we have put forward other community treatment expansion proposals. And so we've learned a lot from you. We've learned what's working, what's not working, where there are gaps in funding, where resources need to be directed. And so between all of that feedback, along with the additional strategies and solutions that were identified by the IST Solutions Work Group last fall, we designed what we think is a pretty comprehensive and meaningful budget package that's essentially responsive to all of the feedback that we had received. Next slide, please. So these are the components that make up our IST Solutions budget package. You'll hear more about our care coordination efforts, more about our early access and stabilization services, our community-based programs supporting restoration and diversion of individuals who are deemed felony IST, as well as our IST reevaluation services. And then also noted earlier on our agenda, we have several other programs that support the overarching strategies to serving the growing population of felony IST defendants, and they provide opportunities to build a broader, comprehensive continuum of care for all DSH patients. And so with that, I'll hand it over to JC to talk more about our care coordination efforts. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. My name is JC Thompson, and I'm a Deputy Director of Hospital Strategic Planning and Implementation at DSH. And part of my portfolio includes the Patient Management Unit. And as Chris mentioned, I'm here to talk about care coordination. So as you can see on the right-hand side of the graphic, DSH has a number of programs to treat ISTs, and we'll be going into details, Chris mentioned, on most of these later in the presentation. But care coordination is a vertical case management model, and it's really the hub for all patient referrals and placements and communication across these programs that you're seeing on the right-hand side. And it's housed within the Patient Management Unit, also referred to as PMU. Next slide, please. So care coordination teams are led by a care coordinator who is a senior psychologist. This psychologist works alongside a nurse practitioner and is supported by a case manager that we call a patient navigator, who is really going to help support that patient's journey through between commitment and treatment or placement into a continuum of care placement. So the care coordination team will do a thorough record review and will liaise with the jail providers. And the care coordination team then will also be screening potential candidates for DSH-funded outpatient programs, and then will liaise with those programs to make those referrals. So care coordination really is at the hub of all these other programs that you'll be hearing about later in the presentation. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Stacey Camacho for the next slide.
Thank you so much, JC. My name is Stacey Camacho. I'm the Acting Deputy Director for our Community Forensic Partnerships Division, which oversees the placement options for the beds outside of our state hospitals. And I'm here to talk about our Early Access and Stabilization Services program. Next slide, please. So what is early access? We see it as the front end of our IST solutions to initiate treatment at the earliest point possible. So as this slide shows here, DSH will partner with county jail mental health providers to support this enhanced treatment service to treat these IST individuals while they're in jail pending placement to a DSH program or waiting for their IST pathway. So components of the program are medication administration, increased clinical engagement, and competency education for felony IST defendants. The program will also fund psychotropic medications, including long-acting injectables, and authority for the program was established in Welfare and Institutions Code section 4361.7. Next slide, please. So other components, really, as I mentioned, the goal is to initiate treatment at the earliest point possible. So the goals are to provide timely mental health, psychiatric stabilization, and competency restoration services, as well as that increased clinical engagement. The treatment is facilitated through private providers and in collaboration with the foundational jail mental health providers, as well as the sheriff's offices. And our goal is to provide the treatment in jails in all 58 counties. As JC mentioned earlier, it's in close collaboration with the care coordination teams to ensure that we have the engagement initiated as soon as possible. And then the emphasis really on this program is on the stabilization component. The goal would be to step down those IST defendants that are eligible and suitable for community placement into a DSH diversion program or into another community-based restoration program. And then happy to report that as of this month, DSH in collaboration with our private providers have engaged about a third of the counties, either through individual county engagement meetings or through our town hall sessions. And we do have plans to engage the remaining counties. And next slide, please. I'll hand it over to Ashley Breath to talk about diversion and community-based restoration programs.
Thank you, Stacy. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ashley Breath, and I am the section chief for the Diversion and Community-Based Restoration Unit under our CFPD, our Community Forensic Partnerships Division at DSH, and I will be walking you through the updates to our diversion and community-based restoration programming. Next slide, please. So just to level set a little bit, I wanted to first touch on the differences between diversion and community-based restoration. These are both community-based mental health treatment programs, but they have kind of really one key difference. So a community-based restoration program is going to be a program that provides intensive mental health services in the community for felony IST individuals, along with restoration programming in order to restore competency for trial for that person in lieu of receiving those services in an inpatient DSH setting. Diversion, on the other hand, is really is intensive mental health treatment in the community that is intended to remove an individual from that competency restoration track altogether. If somebody is placed in a diversion program and successfully completes their programming, the charges against them are dropped and stricken from the record, as well as the felony IST finding in this particular instance. So these are similar programs, and they're both community-based, but there is that key difference around restoration services. Next slide, please. So beginning this fiscal year, DSH has been granted the authority to establish our DSH diversion and our community-based restoration programs as permanent ongoing programs with ongoing funding. Our goal is to create a community-based system that will have the capacity to admit 3,000 new ISTs annually with an average length of stay of 18 months per client. And our goal is to do this over the next 4 fiscal years. Our total ongoing funding, once we get to that final implementation stage, is going to be just over $520 million. DSH will be funding diversion and CBR programs at the same rates so that counties are able to choose which type of programming to have within their community. You can have one type of programming or both. It's up to you and what works best for your county. The funding provided will support wraparound treatment costs for the clients and various non-treatment costs such as county administrative overhead, justice partner costs, and training and technical assistance. DSH is also funded to provide annual $100,000 planning grants to every county in the state, regardless of whether you contract with us for a diversion or CBR program. And those that grant funding is intended to support the work of behavioral health and criminal justice stakeholder groups within the community who would be working towards creating solutions for solutions within your community to stop the arrest of individuals with serious mental illness. DSH will also be making a substantial investment to build out residential beds for this population. Our goal, again, over the next 4 years is to build out upwards of 5,000 beds that will be needed to support the annual admission of 3,000 ISTs into this community program. Obviously, you need a place to send people if we're going to be able to treat this many people out in the community. And so DSH has been granted $468.8 million one time over the next 2 years to support this substantial infrastructure build out. Next slide, please. So here we'll get into, I think, really some of the first major set of statutory changes attached to this the programming within the IST infrastructure, or I'm sorry, not infrastructure, but the IST solutions package. And so these changes are all really in relation to our diversion program. So the first change that I'm going to just note here was a change in the penal code 1001.36 that clarifies that a PC 1370 defendant can be placed in a diversion program even if they cannot agree to comply with the proposed treatment program at the time of the hearing. That was the only change to the penal code. The rest of the changes here are in the Welfare and Institutions Code, that's WIC 4361. And all of these are going to be applicable to any new ongoing contracted programs that we partner with counties for. So these changes are really to transition diversion from the pilot phase into the permanent ongoing program phase. So these changes include the department will no longer be funding programs to serve the likely to be IST defendant. We will only be supporting felony IST defendants in these programs. We made some updates to our diagnostic criteria in the WIC code, so you can take a look at that. We've also updated some of our data collection requirements, including the timeframe within which counties have to submit quarterly data to the department, and we've added a few additional required data elements that need to be collected. And then we have fully removed the county funding match requirement. That will not be a requirement of the ongoing program. It is still a requirement of the original 1819 pilot, but for the permanent ongoing program, that will not be a requirement. And then finally, we do have a clause at the very end that basically just grandfathers in all of our current pilot contracts. So if you are currently contracted with Department of State Hospitals for a pilot diversion program, these new Welfare and Institution Code changes won't apply to that pilot program. These will only apply to new contracts for ongoing permanent programs. All right, and then with that, I will hand the presentation over to Dr. Melinda DeCero.
Hello, everybody. I am Melinda DeCero. I am the Acting Deputy Director of Forensic Services, which oversees the IST Reevaluation Program. Next slide, please. So what is IST Reevaluation? Well, it's a new program that was established in July 1st of last year under the provisions of WIC 4335.2, in which IST evaluators from DSH go into the jails via video conferencing and reevaluate individuals that are on the wait list. And we do this in partnership with county jails. At this point, we have 56 county jails participating in our program, and most of those that don't participate don't have any ISTs. So it's been a very successful program, and we've developed some pretty good partnerships. The big change that we have that's applicable to the sheriffs and the jails is that we've increased our reimbursement for the evaluations from $500 to $1,000 per evaluation. And that's to support the administration and escort of the inmate to the video conferencing session. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of advantages to the IST reevaluation program. It can reduce the wait times for the individuals who are waiting in county jails, who are already restored to competency. And we're finding that 35% of the patients that are waiting on our wait list are already competent. So it really can expedite the wait for an individual. And it also helps identify people that are potential candidates for diversion or other community-based programs. And it helps us identify people that might have some urgent treatment needs and helps link them to other resources. Okay, next slide, please. So because it's a new program, there were a lot of reevaluation related statute changes. All the changes are in either a PC 1370 or 1372 or the Welfare and Institutions Code 4335.2. So one thing that we did is that we ensured that we expanded the eligibility from those with more than 60 days on the wait list to all individuals on the wait list. So everybody has an opportunity to be evaluated. Additionally, we've explicitly added to the statute that jails are permitted to are allowed to permit us to talk to collateral contacts in the medical sections or with custody staff and give us information about symptoms, treatment, and behavior. Before that wasn't explicit, and the collateral contacts were reluctant to talk to our evaluators. And this makes it just a much more fulsome evaluation. Additionally, we've aligned the presumption of competency to be consistent with other PC code 1372 findings from DSH. So there's a presumption of competency, and any challenges from the court shall be based on a subsequent evaluation from a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Additionally, we added that medication-related testimony following the reevaluation should be remote unless good cause is shown. And this helps conserve resources for our program. And it also includes a recommendation, or actually that the court shall consider the medication questions that are in our reports. Further, it gives us our evaluators the ability to contact an attorney for written rationale about why they raised the doubt. And that's really helpful to our evaluators, and I'm sure to an individual's attorney, to help us gain perspective on why the doubt was raised and just what was interfering with that individual's competency. Additionally, we added a mandate that we include any facts supporting grave disability for any non-restorable findings. So if we find somebody non-restorable, we're going to include some information that's going to help the conservatorship evaluator in subsequent findings. Okay, so next slide. Okay, and an additional program that we've started is that we're working with the Judicial Council. We're partnering with them to develop some training for IST evaluators that are in the counties. And this is with the goal of improving and developing the quality of IST evaluation reports. And we're working with the Judicial Council. We're meeting with them every week, and we're going to be providing them $5 million a year over a period of 3 years to contract with a consultant to develop the training. And we're close to getting an interagency agreement with them at this time. And that is all I have. I'll be followed by Ashley again.
I'm actually going to go ahead and cover this slide. So
Okay.
DSH has a number of existing community-based programs that are either dedicated to serving IST patients or serve IST patients in addition to other patient populations. So adding a variety of acuity settings and levels of care across our continuum. So we have our IST Diversion pilot, our existing program. So currently serving or partnering with 24 existing county programs, 16 of which will expand to serve the felony ISTs. We have 6 new county programs that'll serve both felony ISTs and likely to be found felony IST. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, we partner with LA County to provide a community-based restoration program with planned expansions with new counties that are in early planning stages. We also have an IMD and acute capacity program. We currently have a new partnership with an existing facility provider to provide up to 117 beds. With planned additional partnerships underway to build out that IMD infrastructure in the community. And recently activated as part of our conditional release program, a 180 bed at full capacity when we get there, forensic assertive community treatment program. So earlier this year in February, we activated 2 of 3 regionally based programs, one in Sacramento, one in San Diego, and we have a planned activation for later this fall for the Bay Area. So regionally based programs, they will serve clients statewide. And then also within our CONREP overall continuum of care to expand out the settings we have, we activated a 20-bed IMD in 2021 in Northern California, a 30-bed adult residential facility that activated earlier this spring, and a planned activation for a 78-bed, IMD located in Southern California later this year. And next slide, please. And other solution investments are improving overall IST discharge planning, supporting the coordination between DSH and county behavioral health to give counties time to plan for that continuity of treatment upon release from the jail. Also, as part of our CONREP program, we are piloting an independent placement panel to increase the number of discharge-ready placements. So discharging from our state hospitals, the not guilty by reason of insanity and offenders with mental health disorder patients into the community, thereby vacating hospital beds that can be dedicated to serving ISTs. And so authority for this program was added to Welfare and Institutions Code 4360.5. Next slide, please.
All right, this is Ashley Breath again to talk about the Felony IST Growth Cap. So as part of the overall IST solutions package, there was also a Felony IST Growth Cap that was put in place in Welfare and Institutions Code 4336. And basically what this growth cap does is it sets a limit of growth on the number of felony IST determinations statewide. Counties will be charged a penalty if the total number of felony IST determinations in a particular fiscal year exceed that county's baseline as described in the Welfare and Institution Code section. This growth cap is going to apply to all counties across the state and is effective beginning this fiscal year. And so through this growth cap, DSH will invoice counties annually. So the first invoices will be sent out in fiscal year 2023-24 for this prior fiscal year. So the invoices will go out the fall following the end of the fiscal year for that prior year. All of the funds that a county pays to DSH through this invoicing process will be actually reallocated right back to that original county that made the payment. But those funds must be used to support the development of programming designed in the community to prevent the arrest of people with serious mental illnesses. So really looking at those intercept, for those of you who are familiar with the sequential intercept model, looking at those intercept 0 and 1 solutions to prevent the arrest of these individuals and therefore hopefully drive down the number of felony IST determinations within a year. And I also just want to remind everybody of one of the funding pieces that I mentioned earlier in the presentation DSH does have funding to support every county, all 58 counties across the state, with $100,000 annually to support the work of stakeholder work groups who would develop the types of programs that the Felony IST Growth Cap funds would need to be used for. So that more information will be coming out on how to access that funding in the near future. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to hand things over to our legal team.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chris Kent with the legal team. I'm going to talk about our presumption change in 1370. Here we've making a change where we're asking courts to consider placement first in an outpatient treatment program or a community-based treatment program or a diversion program, unless based on the Conradt Community Program Director recommendation, the needs of the defendant or community safety risks require placement to an inpatient program. So this is really trying to get folks to really look at community placements and enhance that spectrum of care. There'll be more information coming on this, as well as training and technical assistance for CPDs, counties, and other stakeholders. And with that, I'll turn it over to Shelley Muzio.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. Just really quickly, Shelley Muzio from the Legal Division. One of the things mentioned earlier was that I think Chris Edens initially said it was the importance of antipsychotic medications in stabilizing individuals. And what we've done is, in that regard, made quite a few changes to different areas of the penal code, and we listed them there in that fourth bullet point. And in recognition of that, I'll just call out a few highlights of it. There is a 1369.1, which had required the Board of Supervisors approval in concurrence with the sheriff and the county mental health director in order to designate a county jail as a treatment facility. That section has now been repealed. So that's no longer in effect. And in Penal Code 1370, it actually now authorizes a county jail as one of the locations that can enforce an involuntary medication order should one be issued by the court. Another key change we made in 1369 was to provide that psychologists, a licensed psychologist, can now opine on the IST defendant's lack of capacity or dangerousness in their alienist evaluation for the court, and that the court shall consider that opinion in determining whether to issue an involuntary medication order. And the reason that's important is because once that order is issued now, the county jail does have authority to enforce that order. And in an effort to assist the county jails with now enforcing the involuntary medication orders, we're offering psychopharmacology consultations, education, and case conferences. We're developing an IMO toolkit to assist counties with how to make that switch to enforcing those involuntary medication orders and IMO consultations. One of the other important factors of the changes we made was that if an IMO is issued, it now basically attaches to that IST defendant. So if they're receiving treatment via the IMO in the county jail, that IMO is going to transfer over to DSH upon admission. There's that continuity of care. We can continue the treatment, and there's not a lapse in any medication. Similarly, if an individual were to come to DSH without an involuntary medication order issued by the court, if one of our facilities were to obtain such an order from the court, that order for the period of time it remains in effect as ordered by the court, it will also transfer back to the county jail upon the IST defendant's return to county custody. That's really important just because that way it allows that stabilization to occur and to remain in place once somebody is stabilized. A few of the other changes in the process, Penal Code Section 2603 is what jails are able to use to obtain an IMO for an IST defendant. It can be used for other inmates in the jail, but this will allow, it clarifies now that any IST defendant or any inmate that's subject to 1369 proceedings or has been found IST under 1370, that the jail can also pursue an IMO under the factors that are present in 2603. And should an order be issued from that hearing, that order would remain in effect upon the individual's transfer to DSH. And I think lastly, one component, it was, I think Melinda mentioned it earlier about the court progress reports, that now they're the opinions that are contained in those reports, whether it's from the reevaluation or whether it's from the progress reports as a one of the DSH facilities is providing that one after somebody's been admitted to one of our facilities. If there's an opinion in there that there's a need for an involuntary medication order, the court shall consider that opinion and decide whether to issue that order, whether to renew it, or whether to, if the original grounds no longer exist for that order, whether to vacate it if there's no other factors in play that would substantiate the need for the order to continue. So a lot of changes in that regard, and this, the purpose is really to help stabilize individuals so that we can basically restore them to competency quicker. Sometimes that once the reevaluation occurs, once that medication is on board, the defendant's able to stabilize, and it really helps everybody's overall goal here. I think that's it. Next slide. I think the next slide is the question slide, so I'm not sure who's going to take that over.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to our DSH presenters for sharing this wonderful information. We will now transition to the Q&A session. Starting with, I'll first start reading the questions that were submitted through the registration form, and then we'll move on to Julie Mallory. We'll read any questions that show up in the chat. And after that, you can use the raise hand feature if you do want to verbalize your question. And once it's your turn, just a reminder, you will have to be prompted to unmute, and then you'll be able to speak. All right, let's start with the first question. So we did receive a few questions asking if a copy of the presentation will be shared. So the slideshow, as well as the recording of this presentation, will be posted on the DSH website, and we will send out an email notification once that is posted. Going on to the next question. The question is, what is being done to coordinate and collaborate with counties on ISTs returned unrestored to ensure they are provided the continuity of care and appropriate placement needed so they do not recycle back through the criminal justice, competency, and potentially LPS Murphy's conservatorship systems?
I can take that question, Sydney. Hopefully everybody can kind of hear me. I think first, I think it's just important for us to, for everyone to recognize that we really do, DSH wants to facilitate appropriate placement for any IST patient who is discharging from our system, as we would with all patients. So there is a challenge, I will say, in that really ultimately our goal is to facilitate that robust, comprehensive community treatment, which is typically going to be in partnership with our county behavioral health. But when someone is in a DSH state hospital and they are discharging, typically they're not going directly to county behavioral health or a community program. They're typically going back to jail. And so with that process, we're usually providing records and information as part of that package of information that is going back when the individual returns to jail. However, as sort of part of our IST solutions budget package, we did receive some new positions. One of our requests was to establish some new positions across our state hospitals to help support that IST discharge planning process, as well as to help coordinate records, and so that we can facilitate that warm handoff wherever that sort of appropriate placement is. And just last week, we kicked off an effort in collaboration with the County Behavioral Health Directors Association to standardize, at this point in time, standardize a sort of common IST documents that would accompany the individual as part of that sort of discharge package. And so we've just started that process and have some different challenges to kind of work through. And currently, the department is predominantly more on a paper process. We are, venturing into that electronic health record process. So what it looks like today is going to look a lot different than it'll look like 2, 3, 4 years from now. But those are a couple of the things that we are doing in an effort to improve that warm handoff and coordination between us and county programs.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
The next question is, what are the solutions for prevention to avoid this issue?
Oh, is that my question as well? Sorry about that. You kind of took it out of order. So some of the solutions to around prevention, just to give you, I don't think we fully explained this. I think many of you on the call know that for DSH and for the state's responsibility, we are responsible for the care and treatment and the funding for services that are delivered to individuals who are felony IST. They're committed as an incompetent to stand trial commitment under a felony charge. That is the state's responsibility. So prior to that commitment, the Department of State Hospitals, we don't have that direct responsibility in terms of funding and driving new programs, but we're certainly keeping an eye on all of the other funding and program opportunities that our sister agencies, namely Department of Healthcare Services and through social services, are offering to counties to sort of build out that broader continuum of community care options, and all of the changes that are happening in the Cal-AIMS space with improving the way that Medi-Cal services are funded and ultimately packaged up and delivered to individuals. So there is coordination at that effort at that level. But also as part of our IST budget package, we do have, and Ashley mentioned this a couple of times in her presentation, is that for every county, we have a guaranteed $100,000 annual allocation that is available explicitly for planning purposes. And so every county is eligible to receive this 100,000. That 100,000 can be used to hire an individual that's dedicated in your county to help support sort of planning and strategic efforts, or you could hire a consultant. There really are no, specific constraints in how you use those funds in terms of a contractor versus a county staff person, but those funds are dedicated to be used to help the county partners and agencies really think through about how they can leverage or plan their systems at the local level as all these new funding opportunities from the state are kind of flowing in, and leveraging the experience and the training and the technical assistance that the Department of State Hospitals is providing to help better inform service development at the more front end, or those intercept 0 and 1 part of the sequential intercept that Ashley had talked about before. So those are some of the things that we're doing to try to contribute to helping tackle this issue. All right, thanks.
Thank you. And that was all of the submitted questions. I'll hand it over to Julie for the questions in the chat.
Great. I'm going to start. The first question was, what are the criteria that qualify a patient for the diversion programs? Thank you to our legal expert, Chris Kent, who responded below that the criteria for general diversion can be found in Penal Code Section 1001.36, and the criteria for DSH funded programs can be in found in Welfare and Institutions Code 4361. Ashley, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, that covers it.
Great. Jumping to the second question here, this is for, I believe, Melinda on reevaluation. It says currently the off-ramping process negates patients from receiving DSH diversion services. It appears this will not be the case with reevaluation.
Actually, Ashley was going to take that as more of a diversion question.
Yeah, great. So off-ramping and reevaluation are basically the same thing. They are the same thing. Off-ramping is reevaluating an individual to off-ramp them out of the wait, for lack of a better term, for a DSH bed because they have restored to competency during that waiting period. And once somebody has been deemed competent, they would no longer be eligible for a community-based program like CBR or mental health diversion.
Thank you.
But I would add to that with the IST reevaluation program, we have retain and treat reports. And so those will have potential diversion evaluations or recommendations for evaluation. Our reports screen a person for diversion eligibility by diagnosis and committing offense or alleged committing offense. And so although 35% are 1372s, the remainder are not. And so we like to give the court an opportunity to refer for diversion evaluation.
Great. All right. Hopping on to the next question here. Do the changes in 1370 regarding being a treatment facility allow a jail facility to administer methadone as a part of a MAT program?
I can take that one. My analysis of it is no, because 1370 and 1369 and 1369.1 are specific to the administration of antipsychotic medications and a determination of whether somebody has capacity to consent to those types of medications. So as far as the administration of methadone as part of an MAT program, I think that'd be something each county would have to check with their county council to see if there's any leeway. 1369.1 itself is specific to antipsychotic medications, and the changes we made in 1370 for a county jail to administer or enforce the involuntary medication order is specific to treatment with antipsychotic medications.
Thank you. And moving right along, the next question is there an allotted amount of funds diversion can use for transportation? This is specific to Kern. So in Kern, we are doing a lot of transporting along with groups, and it would be helpful if we could purchase our own vans specifically for IST diversion.
So I'll go ahead and take this one. So the way that the program was budgeted is at a much higher level than some of these individual kind of wraparound services that a county may need to provide. So we'll work with each county individually within the budgeted amount that's available to them to determine, what they need to spend that money on. But there's nothing that would preclude you from doing something like purchasing vans for transportation or contracting with a transportation provider or something like that. That can be part of those wraparound services that are provided for the clients.
Yeah, and then I would also add too, I think you probably covered this, is that we do have the overhead rate that we've applied to add to the sort of total package of funding that's available to establish and or expand or continue existing community-based programs. So I think, yeah, definitely well within sort of the total budget that we would have available based on the number of people that could be served by your program. I think we could be flexible in how those funds are spent.
Great. Next question. Often a court hearing, such as an OSC or confirmation of transport, is scheduled after a patient has been admitted to JBCT and the court has been notified. What is the plan to streamline communication between JBCT's court and DSH to prevent this? And if you'd like, maybe we can ask the person who submitted the question to come off mute. Do we need a little bit of clarification on this one?
Yeah, I'm thinking, that certainly streamlining communication is absolutely at the core of what our care coordination teams are going to be doing. I'm not clear though what problem is being presented in this particular question, so I'm not sure how to address it.
I know we have Kartik on the line. Kartik, can you help find Donna and see if she can request to come off mute for this question?
We could also follow up with Donna. I mean, I would assume that we have Donna's email and could get some clarity and provide an updated sort of response.
Great.
That could be posted for everybody.
That sounds good. I know there's a lot of participants on this call, so it may be hard to track down. So Donna, our apologies. We will circle back with you and so we can better answer your question. I'm going to jump ahead here. A lot of those people will not agree to treatment or will agree, but then leave the program after a few days or weeks. Are there any solutions for this issue?
So I'm going to jump in on this one because I suspect that this is related to diversion and the need to whether or not somebody agrees to treatment and then AWOLing. I think I'm not a clinician, but I will say a lot of it's going to have to do with the programming that is set up. There are a lot of best practices that are coming out of our diversion pilot around things like partnering with county probation to help monitor individuals to prevent something like an AWOL from happening. So I think that there's a lot of information that can be found on our webpage and through some of our diversion programs as well in order to help prevent those types of issues in this programming.
Thank you. And another question, are attorneys able to request reevaluation of incarcerated clients? How long does the process take?
So I can get that question. So the attorneys can ask for a reevaluation. They can inquire of the court if they believe that their defendant is already competent. They can ask the court under 1370A1G, but otherwise the reevaluations are conducted in the order that PMU defines for us.
Just kind of jumping in on that from PMU, we're looking at things like commitment date order, but also how many days prior to admission we're estimating an individual is. So those are the types of factors that we're taking into account there.
Thank you both. And another question about the 3 diagnoses for the permanent program, wondering if the permanent IST diversion, are we only accepting the 3 diagnoses?
No. So if you look at the new language in WIC 4361, you will see the new diagnostic criteria. It is not specifically limited to those original 3 diagnoses.
Thank you. And for JBCT, the IMO toolkit, where will this document be housed? Also, what is the process for obtaining a psychopharmacology consultation?
Is Kate on the line to help field this question?
I am. That's a good question about where the IMO toolkit would be housed. I imagine it'll be on one of our forward-facing websites, maybe the diversion website that we have that we'll probably need to expand. And then for obtaining a psychopharmacology consultation, we have an email process. So just contact us and we can get you the email for the PRN group to get that consultation. We can put that on the website too.
Yeah. If we have it, perhaps we could try to drop it into the chat, the email address. And I should also clarify, the IMO toolkit is still in sort of final stages of development. So it isn't currently available. That was an effort that we had originally kicked off with some support from the Sheriff's Association and our resident experts. And we'll definitely want to share that toolkit with our stakeholders for some feedback before it's completely finalized. And then certainly we will, aside from having it available on our website, we'll distribute it to our various listservs.
Thank you. And I see Melanie did go ahead and drop that email into the chat. So it's prn@dsh.ca.gov. Back to the permanent diversion programs here. What will be the timeframes for the amount of individuals served under the permanent funding? For example, how many individuals need to be served in a year?
So we will work with each county individually to determine that. The maximum amount that in terms of individuals to be served annually and funding will be based on 60 to 70% of the total determinations that the county had in last fiscal year 21-22. But that will be something that DSH will be calculating and working with each county on individually.
Great. I don't see any other questions in the chat at this time.
All right, and we will save some time if anyone wants to raise their hand and ask a question.
Sydney, could you do me a favor and if, just to, while we still have folks on the line, pull up our presentation and go back to just the graphic with our various IST solution components. Would you mind doing that just to
Yes.
kind of bring it home? While she's doing that, I wanted to kind of flag, I didn't do this while Stacy was covering all of our other IST related budgeted programs that have been in play, in the last few years. One of the programs that she had identified was our IMD subacute/acute program funding. And so just to sort of touch back on that, is in last year's budget, we received about a $250 million one-time appropriation with additional funds to support the operating costs to build new IMD, community IMD, and that could be subacute, that could be acute, but basically community IMD infrastructure to support the felony IST population. And really we see this as a big component and a complement to all of the community programs that we're seeking to launch through partnerships with the counties and or private providers. If you go back to Ashley's presentation, she indicated that we've got infrastructure funding to build out upwards of 5,000 beds to serve about 3,000 new individuals, unique new individuals on an annual basis. Sydney, if you could go to the graphic that just shows all the IST solutions pictures. And so I just really wanted to touch on that a bit in that, go to the next slide, one more slide, okay, that all of these components, I think what we're trying to share with all of you, back one slide, sorry. Yeah, that one, is that they all work together. And I hope that you got a flavor of that from today's presentation, right? So when an individual is at IST and they're referred to the Department of State Hospital, that's the point in which we are responsible for that person. Once we get that sort of first document, that court order from the courts, and we know who that individual is, and they've been referred to us. And so as soon as that person is known to us, that's where the care coordination team is going to kick in, and they're going to start facilitating and coordinating whatever treatment services are necessary for that individual. We're going to first start with that early access to stabilization services. And the reason for that is because the wait times to get into a DSH program are quite lengthy at this point. And we also don't yet have all of those 5,000 beds that we're envisioning are built out into the community. And so we want to start providing treatment services as soon as we know who these individuals are. And really the goal is not just to provide that access to treatment at the earliest point possible in their IST journey, but also really truly to try to facilitate that stabilization. And by and large, that stabilization is typically going to be connected to getting them on the appropriate antipsychotic medication. Because again, going back to one of the points that I mentioned is that about 70% of these individuals are in those schizophrenia spectrum disorders, which are very highly treatable, typically with medication. We're going to facilitate that stabilization as quickly as possible. If they do need continued treatment and they need to facilitate, monitoring of their medication, they need to be more in an inpatient type of facility. That's where that IMD subacute acute program kind of comes into play as another sort of midway point to help continue to facilitate and support that stabilization. And then eventually, once we have more community residential programs that are available for our IST population, then the goal would be to connect that individual to that county program, whether that is a community-based restoration program or a diversion program, so that they're stepping out of the jail into the IMD and then out to the least restrictive setting possible through the CBR and diversion program. So it's intended to complement each other. That's our vision. And it could work the other way. If you have an individual in your county program, your community-based restoration or diversion program that is decompensating, we want to mitigate that risk of them failing out of the program or leaving, recidivating. We want to mitigate that risk. It is possible to potentially then re-refer that person to the IMD setting so that they are in this sort of higher level of care for a short period of time. And then that person can then be safely transitioned back down to that lower level of care. So all these programs are intended to work together. And then in addition to that sort of early access to stabilization and our IMD program, and then eventually what we envision as this robust sort of community infrastructure to support CBR and diversion, we also do have, as Melinda talked about, our reevaluation services. And so for individuals who are waiting, a long time in the jail and may have already restored to competency, we have that ability to reevaluate them. We are also doing some of that work too if the individual steps down into that IMD or that acute program, they've been stabilized, perhaps there's not a diversion program readily available or that has space to take that individual, we may reevaluate them at the point that they're in the IMD as well. And so just to kind of give you that flavor that these are all intended to work together to truly try to comprehensively provide services and facilitate those warm handoffs, ensure that we've got sort of robust coordination of care happening at sort of all stages of the individual's needs. So I hope that helps.
I just wanted to jump in. We actually did get a question about the IMD. Will the IMD accept felony IST that are not conserved?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, they're not. And I guess maybe I need some clarification on what that means in terms of not conserved, because if they're in an IST commitment, right, then and they've been ordered to the Department of State Hospitals, then we have the ability to place that individual where we have space within our system of care. So we do have the ability to sort of direct and help facilitate placement in any one of our DSH facilities. And sort of what encompasses a DSH facility is going to be a state hospital bed. It could be a jail-based competency treatment bed, as well as one of these new IMD facilities that we are starting to build up.
Great. And the clarification was not LPS conserved. Great.
Right.
And then I think we also have Donna, if we can go back up to the original question here, I'll read it again, and then I think Donna's ready to unmute and provide some clarification. The question was, often a court hearing such as an OSC or confirmation of transport is scheduled after a patient has been admitted to JBCT and the court has been notified. What is the plan to streamline communication between JBCT's court and DSH to prevent this? Ashley, were you able to send the request?
You cut out for me, so I apologize. I didn't completely hear that question. See if I can try to help in some way.
It looks like the request was sent to Donna and maybe she is not unmuting at this point in time. So we may not be able to circle to that question at this time.
Well, I'm happy to circle back after we get more clarification, for sure.
All right, were there any additional questions? Pratik, are you seeing any hands raised?
No, I don't see any hands raised.
No, all right. Well, thank you everyone for taking the time to join this presentation. Thank you to all of our DSH presenters as well as the technical team. Everyone have a wonderful day, and just a reminder that the slides and the recording will be posted on the DSH website, and we will be sending an email notification once they are posted. Thank you, everyone.